Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 177. Thank you for joining us. Today, Kolbe's Everett Buyarski joins Bonnie and I to welcome writer, teacher, game designer, and Kolbe alumnus Alexi Sargeant to the Kolbecast. Our conversation takes us from Alexi's days with Kolbe through writing and game design, all the way to his most recent work on a children's book about saints and their animal friends. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Steven, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Steven. What's a good word?
My word for the day is collaboration.
Okay, collaboration.
So,
I'm writing it down.
We'll see if that fits in.
And I will save my comments on collaboration versus accompaniment from a pianist's perspective for another day, because I have lots of thoughts on those, but that's not pertinent to this conversation. Joining us today is Everett Buyarski, Kolbe's Academic Services Director. Hi, Everett.
Good afternoon. Happy to be back with you.
It's always good to have you. Everett's a good friend of the Kolbecast. We have among us a Kolbe alumnus we're very glad to get to visit with today, Alexi Sargeant. Welcome to the Kolbecast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Been looking forward to this. Glad it has worked out for us to visit today. Would you tell us a bit about yourself and your Kolbe connection?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Alexi Sargeant. I currently live in Maryland with my wife and daughters, and I teach at a classical Catholic school. When I was in high school, I used the Kolbe curriculum as a homeschooler, and this provided a strong foundation for my homeschool endeavors and set me up well to go on to college at Yale University, and then off into the world, including working in several educational institutions along the way.
Good deal. You describe yourself on your website as a writer, a theater maker, and a game creator. Those are topics we're looking forward to talking in more depth about today. Would you tell us a bit about going to Yale from Kolbe? How was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Yale, and specifically as a freshman, I did the program Directed Studies at Yale, which is essentially Yale's great books track for freshmen. So that was something I was kind of particularly well set up for, thanks to the Kolbe curriculum. You know, I had read for the first time ancient Greek dramas and the brothers Karamazov, right? You know, as part of my Kolbe studies, and so I had some foundation already in place when I took this kind of intensive 1-year Yale course that is all about those great books and all about seminaring on great books. I got to, have some experience to draw on as I was then in seminar with really impressive fellow students at Yale talking about these powerful texts from the tradition.
One of the things that we always love hearing is from our alumni about how well they were prepared for college and how that went.
Yeah.
What was that? You mentioned briefly about that, but did you find Yale to be more challenging than expected, about as challenging as expected, maybe a little easier than expected? Kind of what was that like for you going from, especially a lot of people have this idea that homeschoolers are really poorly prepared for college, which doesn't tend to be our experience. But you talk about, maybe how that fit into your expectations as you're heading off there your freshman year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I felt very confident, and for the most part, that was borne out. I had a lot of experience of being on top of my own time management as a homeschooled high school student, and that proved to be very crucial for college, where you're taking classes, with wonderful professors, but there's no coordination already there. It's all on you, the student, to make sure you're keeping on top of all of the things you're being asked to do, all of the reading you need to take care of and the tasks you need to accomplish. There's no bell, there's no principal pointing the way necessarily. And so having some experience of, structured independence from my homeschool background and from using the Kolbe curriculum was, I think, a good preparation for what I encountered at Yale.
One of the other pieces that we love talking, especially with our Kolbe alum, is, are there any just favorite memories or things that stood out to you from your homeschooling journey that just, even looking back now that you think it was really great being homeschooled?
Yes, there are. I think some of the biggest things I'd highlight were, homeschool extracurriculars that were made possible by the flexibility, right, of homeschooling. So I directed several Shakespeare plays while I was a homeschool high school student. There was a student-run Shakespeare group that emerged out of the homeschool community in my area. And so I got to act in several plays and then eventually direct Merchant of Venice and Macbeth.
That continues now. I can see how it's influenced what you're up to these days, right? And
it has, yeah. I've continued. Shakespeare is a lifelong interest now, and I've continued getting. I continue to appreciate the chance to direct Shakespeare when I get it.
I found a few very interesting articles you've written about Shakespeare's plays in elements of faith and virtue and repentance in some of your writing online. I found that just lots of food for thought there.
He's a great writer, this Shakespeare guy, he knew his stuff.
Do you have any words of encouragement for students who are about to meet Shakespeare this year for the first time in their courses?
Yes, I think don't be upset if you don't understand all the language at first. Try reading it aloud, sometimes a couple times. This is drama, right? This is meant to be heard. And sometimes things will just click when you hear it aloud. Or if you're having trouble and you're allowed to do this, find a recording of a professional actor taking on this text. And then you'll see how, with some understanding and some textual skills, an actor can make a text really come alive and suddenly seem totally clear, even if you were lost on the page, right? Shakespeare wrote words that were meant to be performed, meant to be spoken aloud. And when we speak them and perform them, often they all fall into place.
I think that's so crucial when getting into a lot of the works that we're reading within the kind of the Western canon, is that there are so many of those works that are designed to be done orally, or that would be best understood orally. For me, one of the examples that just shines out is when reading Plato's Symposium, is at the end of it, there's this Diotimus Ladders, this famous kind of explanation of beauty. And I'd read it multiple times, and I couldn't get it put together. But I had the opportunity to participate in a reading with a group of other students and faculty. And when the woman who was reading Diotimus' part got up there and actually did it as a reading, all of a sudden, all of the pieces just clicked. And I started scribbling notes madly to kind of put the outline together where it actually made sense as a text in a way that didn't when I just tried to read it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm reading that work with high school juniors right now. So I will keep that thought in mind about how to help people understand it as a speech, right? Because this is a series of speeches, of toasts, as it were, kind of raised to the god of love. So it makes sense that it would all come together with the spoken voice.
Well, tell us about that. So now you teach. Tell us about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm starting my second year teaching at the St. Jerome Institute, which is a Catholic liberal arts high school in Washington, D.C. We're very great books focused. I teach humanities, and the spine of the humanities course is a series of great works that I'm sure sound familiar to Kolbe students and Kolbe parents. With the freshmen, we're reading things like the Odyssey and the Aeneid, Beowulf, Song of Roland, eventually The Old Man and the Sea, and Notes from Underground. With the juniors, the reading list has things like Plato's Symposium, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Augustine's Confessions, and several Shakespeare plays. Then we turn to the moderns and we read a little bit of Locke, a little bit of Hobbes, getting a sense of this new world. Some novels, Pride and Prejudice, Frankenstein. This year, wrapping up with Brave New World, and then C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man as kind of counterpoints there.
Do many of the students come from a classical formation to that point, or is this going to be sort of all new for them once they come to the school where you teach now?
Yeah, two of the main places our students come from are the St. Jerome Academy, which is a classical lower school and one that's been operating for a decade now under a classical model here in Hyattsville, Maryland. And then there's also a lot of homeschool students who are coming from a homeschool background to this high school. And so depending on what they've been doing for homeschooling, they may or may not have encountered these works in this way before. But I think it's a pretty good school for people coming from homeschooling, insofar as especially Christian homeschooling families, there's a very strong set of Christian values to the school too. So it's hopefully not as difficult to transition as it might be going from homeschooling to a more traditional format of high school here. In my own family growing up, I'll say we always took it 1 year at a time, whether we're going to homeschool or do a different program. And so I ended up, using Kolbe and going all the way through high school. My brothers made the switch, right? At high school, they switched and they went to a private Catholic school in Philadelphia. My sister did kind of a mix, partial homeschool and then part-time with a more intensive homeschool co-op with a building and uniforms and a bell and everything like that. So we kind of always took it as our model that we were going to mix and match as needed and find what was right for each kid, for each student, and treat homeschooling as one of our options and a thing that we could go from to a different format of schooling. For me, it worked well to homeschool all the way through, but for my siblings, we made different choices based on each person's need each year.
And I think that's really the beauty of what you just described, is the beauty of homeschooling. And certainly the 1 year at a time approach is very much what, especially for people who are new to homeschooling, they can feel that, getting into homeschooling, that they suddenly have to make a decision that affects the rest of their lives, that they have to, go all in and commit for the next 10 years. And it's very much not the case, is that right, as a parent, you should be education is an ongoing discernment about what's best for a specific student, what's best for your family, what's best for each of the individual students. So I think that's a beautiful piece of advice and a great way to approach that idea that the parent is the primary educator of the child and should be making decisions about what is going to be best.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you do much with theater at your school? Do you have stage productions there?
Yes, I've gotten the opportunity to direct Shakespeare at the St. Jerome Institute, which is wonderful. There's a group, we call ourselves the St. Genesian Players. And so last year we put on Twelfth Night. This year, I'm about to hold auditions for a production of The Winter's Tale. So it's very exciting to get to introduce these Shakespeare plays to the students and then put them on for the school and the broader community. I'm really, really proud of what the students did last year and excited for the production this year.
The Winter's Tale is actually in one of the articles I was referring to earlier. So let's talk about your writing. You're published in many places. We can find your writing online. Do you have as much time for that these days with the St. Jerome Institute, or how do you fit it all in now?
Oh, it's a great question. I have to prioritize a little. So there have been periods of my life where more of what I've done has been freelance writing. And so I've gotten the chance to place articles in publications I am really glad to be part of. First Things, The New Atlantis, New Criterion, Plow, Aletheia, which maybe is where you saw the Winter's Tale article, reflecting on the kind of Lenten themes of Shakespeare's Winter's Tale. So now I have less time to do that because teaching is a semi all-consuming task. Certainly last year, when it was my first year, it was fairly all-consuming. But I still value the chance to sometimes get to place pieces. A piece of mine about manliness, essentially about masculine virtue and the need for men of fidelity, came out in Plow sometime last year, and I was very pleased to have that out there, because in some ways that brought together many of the themes and works I care about most. I think I worked in references to John Paul II and G.K. Chesterton and the film Secondhand Lions. So all the greats, all the biggest, most important voices on this topic. But yeah, in some ways, I'm prioritizing the topics I care about the very most, since I have less time for freelance writing right now. But it's all kind of year by year, situation by situation, figuring out what is going to be the best way to use the talents and to use the interest that I have, hopefully to bring glory to God and edify my audience.
Kind of that continued theme of kind of that regular discernment of what is God calling me to do now, like you're saying, whether it's brick and mortar school, homeschool, whether it's more writing now, more teaching now. Yeah, I think that's great.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and really, if you're talking about virtue, that's very much right within the realm of virtues. We're talking about the virtue of prudence, right? It's not only there are many goods, and the virtue of prudence is discerning among the goods, and choosing which good is at the right time and in the right manner. So I think that's a beautiful kind of application of all of those virtues coming together.
It's such a crucial thing, and I think young people have a tendency to want to choose every good all at once and then find themselves overwhelmed. I know this was a learning experience for me at one point during my education, realizing I can't commit to everything, even though they're all good things. I have to pick some things to really focus on at this time.
Yeah. And it's great advice for homeschooling parents as well, is that you can look out there and look at, there are so many good things to choose from when you're looking at curriculum options. And it can be very easy to think, I should do all of the good things. And then you get down and you start doing all the good things, and you realize this is about 60 hours a week worth of education. And so you need to make some decisions about, which of the good things do I need to let go of goods? They are all goods, but which are the right goods for my family and for the student? And I think that's one of the regular challenges is right, when you see things that are good. It's easy to reject things that are obviously evil. You say, that's bad, I shouldn't do that. That's an easy one. It's much harder to make those decisions about letting go of some of the goods. I was really curious, on the website talks about your writing being about God, superheroes, Shakespeare, and other topics at the intersection of religion and popular culture. And I think that obviously that little bit there at the end, the intersection of religion and popular culture, is probably the key. But can you talk a little bit about what really speaks to you, or kind of called you in the direction of that intersection between religion and popular culture and probably some of your reading and your intellectual thought, and then in your writing?
Yeah, thank you so much. So some key authors in my formation are C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, G.K. Chesterton, and obviously they share an interest in fantasy, fairy tale, imaginative fiction, but also have deeply philosophical understandings of this. Like Tolkien's On Fairy Stories is such a seminal essay. G.K. Chesterton's book Orthodoxy has a chapter called The Ethics of Elfland about what fairy tales revealed to him in his conversion process about the kind of moral nature of man. And so I think, inspired by that, I've been very interested in what the kind of stories within popular culture, including science fiction and fantasy and superheroes, have to say. Whether intentionally or not, there's often some interesting philosophical nugget to be mined there, and we can both. I certainly am a fan, and also hopefully a savvy reader of these pieces of culture, and so. You'll find, pieces that I've written about superhero films and superhero storytelling, trying to get at, what, this version of Batman is saying about the city and justice. What this version of Superman is saying about inspiration and idealism and our kind of human aspirations, right? So I've been really interested in how we tell and retell these stories and what the philosophical and religious themes are that are embedded within them.
As you were as you were discussing this, I was immediately thinking of course, these things came about at the time when they did, as science is, building and building and building. The atomic bomb is coming along, and all of these things. But here you've got, like you're saying, Tolkien, Lewis, these other people who are bringing, to a certain extent, myth back. The stories that we all long to hear, these men who are great men, or, and I'm sure as you've probably commented on, sometimes they're not really great men, but maybe they're great men in the eyes of some in society or whatever. So it's an interesting, I thought about some of those things, but I hadn't put together until you mentioned those people and started talking about that this is an appropriate outlet, it seems like, for people today. We have a desire for this, and most of the world doesn't share our Catholic faith. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that before, but that's something that occurs to me.
Seems like a good way to reach folks who have that interest but aren't thinking along. Yeah, it's a new way to reach some folks. Yeah.
I'll take a moment since we're on this topic and put in a plug for the convention, Doxacon. This is the Christian sci-fi and fantasy convention. Usually it's held sometime in the fall here in the kind of greater DC area, but it's a wonderful time bringing together Christians of a number of denominations who are interested in fantasy, science fiction, kind of nerd culture, and what a theological perspective on these stories can be. So I gave a talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe at a previous Doxacon. My wife Leah Sargeant has spoken about any number of fantasy and science fiction interests there, including Diane Duane's "So You Want to Be a Wizard," which is interestingly a book that plays a role early on in her own conversion story, even though it's not a like piece of Christian fantasy per se, and yet there's some truth within it that was important in her own development. So Doxacon, lots of interesting people talking about Christian perspectives on science fiction and fantasy and nerd culture. Look it up, and if you're around, you can get tickets and come.
When is that?
Yeah, it looks like it's November 3rd and 4th.
Yes, the upcoming Doxacon is November 3rd and 4th at Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia.
That brings me to another question that I was interested in seeing some of your writing, and also it looks like some of your kind of other hobbies and activities is involved in some tabletop gaming, both in, it sounds like participating, but also in creation. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the links between some of your academic interests and your writing and reading, and maybe how that plays into how you view something like tabletop gaming, both as getting involved maybe as a player and participant, but then leading into creation?
Absolutely. This is a great question. I could talk for a long time about this, but I'll try to give more of the capsule version. So tabletop role-playing games, very interesting medium where you're creating a story, right? You're telling a story, but you're creating a story collaboratively with people around your table. So in the sort of archetypical example, you have one player is the game master, serving as narrator and rules, arbiter and voice of all the non-main characters, and then the other players are each playing a protagonist in a story, say a fantasy quest narrative where they're on some kind of engaged in some kind of adventure and rolling dice to see how their characters fare, moment to moment. So this is, in a storytelling tradition, but it's not being kind of, polished by a single author and then presented to an audience. This is very participatory, essentially a partially improv story with contributions from the game master, the other players, the dice, the rules written by the game designer, and whatever kind of setting that has been decided on, whether that's a setting right out of a book someone's written or a setting that's also been collaboratively generated by the individuals playing at the table. So the fact that each story is going to be different and each experience is going to be different is part of the appeal here, and a kind of exciting thing and an empowering thing is that each participant who is playing is being asked to be a storyteller, right? And so, the skills you develop include skills that will help when you're telling, if you're an author or a writer who wants to tell stories on your own, you'll have gained some skills from creating stories collaboratively at the gaming table. You also just gain skills at collaboration, right? Because a tabletop role-playing game is essentially a conversation. And like other conversations, it has rules. It's just that some of these rules are more explicit. Like, when you do this in the game, roll this many dice and add this number. And some of the rules are the same type of implicit rules we're used to in other conversations, like try not to talk over each other, defer to the host when they're, speaking about things that have to do with just the logistics of your conversational setting. Things like that. I guess what I was building towards is, role-playing games are this collaborative storytelling endeavor, and both the collaboration and the storytelling are honed by participating in this hobby.
Yeah, I had a timely experience just this weekend. Then I was playing a role-playing game with like 3 other, I guess, classical Catholic teachers and my son. It was a Gothic sort of setting that we've just started up, but afterward we were kind of collaborating and comparing it, because it's our first session, kind of all doing this, to like improv, a little bit of that, a little bit like our experiences in seminar discussions where, we're trying to figure out how do we play off each other? How do we complement each other, even in telling the story, so to not cut each other off, to not, so it was, we were just actually reflecting on this, like, how can we do this better? How can we get this so that it's working really smoothly and telling a great story? So just had that experience within the last couple of days, as a matter of fact, but really fun.
That's fantastic. I can talk a little about my design experience. I've built a couple of games and contributed to some games. I like a lot of things in the kind of the indie world of RPGs. So, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is Dungeons and Dragons, and I've played some Dungeons and Dragons and had fun. But there's other games that are kind of more my jam, I suppose. And so, there's a game I wrote about when I wrote my piece on role-playing games as collaborative storytelling. I talked about running a campaign of Masks, which is a game about young superheroes finding their place in the world. A game designed by Magpie Games, and that was one of the first like long campaigns I ran, and that was really fun. Players got really into it, and we built, I think, a wonderful world and story together. So some games I've created, in that mode, using some mechanical inspiration from Masks, include Autumn Triduum, which is a game about religious sisters confronting the forces of darkness. So this is a heavily Catholic game set at All Hallows Eve and All Saints Day and All Souls Day, and you're playing as religious sisters, dealing with some kind of supernatural danger and relying on your bonds with your sisters and your faith in God and the intercession of the saints to make it through. So a game that has some spookiness and some gothicness, but ultimately is about a universe where good wins out. That's the design intention, at least. And some games I've published include The Great Soul Train Robbery, a weird Western allegorical game about desperados robbing the train to hell. So crazy cowboy stuff and meditations on damnation and redemption all in one package. And also Back Again from the Broken Land, a game about small adventurers sharing stories on the long walk home from an epic war. And if that sounds like it's inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, It is. You're right. You got me. This is a heavily Hobbit themed game about little people who ended up in this big epic conflict, and then the game is about their burdens, their reflections, the meals they share as they're making their way home in the aftermath of the fall of the Doomslord.
And one other one that I'd seen that I was just curious about, especially particularly given your background in Shakespeare. I know there's the mention of a Shakespearean fighting game. Can you tell us what would lead you to an inspiration to think, you know what this world needs? I think we need a Shakespearean fighting game. I think that's a space that needs to exist.
Yeah. So that's a board game, right? So another kind of part of the whole realm of tabletop called No Holds Barred, BARD, Bard. And that, that's just for fun, right? That's just like, what if you could, put on a board Hamlet from Hamlet and Othello from Othello and Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing and the bear from The Winter's Tale, and just have them fight it out and see who would win. So it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek, hopefully like fun and Shakespeare nerdy board game that gives people a chance to mash up Shakespeare characters, fight to be the last character standing, and that get to tell like funny stories like, wow, that was crazy. In that game, Puck went around giving everybody donkey heads until Richard III managed to sneak up behind him and poison him.
But you shared with us an article that we will put in our show notes about games and the community that develops from them, and some of your wife Leah's experiences playing those. I really appreciate you sending that, and I know our listeners will enjoy reading that as well. And I'm glad she came up. She was a guest at our call the Holiness Retreat for our students the last school year.
Yes, that's wonderful.
So I'm noticing a theme of collaboration with your theater and with role-playing games, and something we haven't yet gotten to, but we will get to here in a minute, about the book that you are publishing. By the time this episode airs, it will be out into the world. There's a lot of collaboration going on here. Well done, Steven, with your providential timing on the word selection.
There is, I should say, I collaborated with my wife Leah on Back Again from the Broken Land, so I want to give credit to her as a game designer as well. She's multi-talented. She's as you said, a speaker, a writer, and a game designer in her own right.
I really enjoyed her comments on community at the retreat where she spoke, and hear it echoed in in some of your comments here about the opportunities the games offer to build that.
So maybe this is going back a bit, but in addition to the great deal of fun that I know these games are, because I enjoy them with my children and with friends and things like that, it seems like you appreciate something that seems to be missing from our culture today. Like growing up, my parents were always getting together with other families to play cards. There'd be card night or whatever, and all the families would come together. So I'd be playing with the other family's children and things. And it seems like that's slipped away from what I've seen for the most part. I don't hear that in the same way, but maybe that's from my life. But it sounds like you've seen that and kind of captured that in your life with other families and things. Is that right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as our children get older, right now we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. As our children get older, it will be easier to incorporate them more directly into family game night. At the moment, what we've sometimes done is we'll have people over and then put the girls to bed and then play something while they're asleep. Or this summer, one thing we did, we hosted a whole day of gaming at the house. It was called Sargecon, and it was focused on games that I designed, a sort of mini convention, slash all day game party. And for that, not only were my kids there, but some of the attendees brought their kids as well. So we had some babysitters hired to be like chasing around the kids while grownups were playing games at like every available surface in the house. And that was fun, organized chaos, and I think a good moment of bringing family together with the hobby. I certainly look forward to the future when my girls are old enough to be more an active part of the games that we play as a family.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And I think, again, I mean, everything that certainly that you're talking about there with collaboration, with community. And we mentioned, we were blessed to have your wife join us for the retreat, and there she was much talking about community building off her own book, and kind of building the Benedict option as far as talking about community. And then I know we just mentioned that you've got a book coming up about saintly creatures. Can you tell us more about that book and maybe what some of the inspirations were for you in writing it?
Yeah, happy to. So this is super fun. I had the chance to write a children's book for the new Word on Fire Spark imprint, children's book publishing line at Word on Fire. And the book is called Saintly Creatures, 14 Tales of Animals and Their Holy Companions. And it's a collection of saint stories themed around these friendships between saints and animals. So we have Saint Francis of Assisi and the Wolf of Gubbio. We have Blessed James Hio in Bake and the tiger whose cave he hides in with other Korean Catholics while they're undergoing persecution. We have Saint Roberga, who performs a miracle that brings about the resurrection of a goose. And I got to pull stories from all over the history of the church. We tried to make sure there were saints from many different eras and places, men and women saints, all of whom had these, exciting, interesting, humorous friendships with animals, because we thought that would be, appealing to a young audience, and it has been. My daughters are enjoying the book, and my youngest likes to just point at the animals and make their noises or her approximations of their noises as we go. Yeah, it was a really exciting experience to write the book, research these saints. I learned about some saints I didn't know about before, and I learned more about saints that I did know about, got to dive deep into some of the well-known stories like St. Francis and the Wolf, and get a strong understanding of why the story has lasted, and present it in a telling that's accessible to a young audience.
It sounds great. I'm looking forward to reading it. So to get to the 14, I'm sure you had to have some selection process. Did you design a game to sort through the options to come to the 14 who made it into the book?
Yeah, like a bracket sort of tournament setup. It's more that my editor and I had to think, like, we put together a longer list and then thought about what was going to be a good balance in the book, and also just like what exactly was on theme. Like we really liked this one story. It's Saint Helenus, and he rides on a crocodile, and we're like, oh, that'd be so great. We have art of him riding on the crocodile, but the crocodile isn't his friend in the story, right? The crocodile represents the forces of darkness. He smites the crocodile. He rides on the crocodile to show that he has power over it, and then he smites it to show that the forces of darkness cannot prevail against good. And we're like, this isn't quite what we're doing here. This story goes in a different book, with St. George and the Dragon. But here we're going for stories where what's revealed in the relationship between the saints and the animals is this sort of Edenic return, right? Where the saint, as the friend of God, now is able to do what Adam did in the garden when humanity was in a sort of harmony with the natural world, and could give names to the animals and be a benevolent lord over the animal realm. And the stories where humans are in conflict with animals are a sort of different genre and telling a different lesson. So we kind of had to sadly not include Helenus and the crocodile, and stick with stories where there's a rapport between the saint and the animal. Not that there aren't scary moments in here. Like we have Saint Brendan and the whale, and of course his monks initially are really frightened when they go to an island and it turns out it's actually this giant whale that they've accidentally made landfall on. So but in that story, the whale is an instrument of God and helps bring them along in their seafaring pilgrimage. So we thought that one would work.
It sounds great. And so there was, I'm guessing, some collaboration with the illustrator as well as your editor and a few other folks to bring the book to the world.
Yeah, so Anita Bargigiani is the illustrator, and she did a tremendous job. I feel really blessed to have her art in this book, because of course the art is going to be what grabs people. I hope the stories keep them coming back, but I think the art is going to be what grabs people when they pick up this book at first. And she has these wonderful full-page illustrations of each saint, with their animal companion in a sort of icon-esque pose. Right, she brings in some medieval design elements as well as kind of vibrant modern sensibility to each piece. And so you should, at least, listeners, go and look up saintly creatures so you can look at some of this art, and then maybe it'll sell you on buying this book.
Not just that, not just the art. It sounds great. We'll, of course, include a link to that in our show notes for folks to find that. As we are getting close to the end of our conversation, you gave some advice to folks meeting Shakespeare for the first time earlier already. Do you have any other words of wisdom or encouragement for aspiring writers or actors in general, game designers, anything else you'd like to leave with us?
Keep notes all the time. Carry your notebook around or jot it down in your notes app on your phone if you've got one of those. Just as you have these thoughts, record them. You never know when a new project will emerge that needs you to turn back to something you'd worked out years ago, even, right? Ideas you've been kicking around in the past sometimes prove to be exactly what's needed for a later project. And so be open to the promptings of Providence, and make that easier by keeping notes for yourself to return to.
Great. So, Alexi, is your website the best place to find sort of the repository of your work, and on from there? Is that where folks should head?
Yes, people can look at alexisargeant.com. I need to update it, so thank you for reminding me. But that has a good number of my articles on it. And if you're on social media, you can find me at Alexi Sargeant on Twitter. The thing is just spelling Sargeant right. It's Sargeant. I'm happy to hear from folks if they're thinking about their own creative projects or educational endeavors. Always happy to chat with people.
Super. This has been a great conversation, better than I was expecting. I had high hopes. I knew it was going to be great already. It's even better than that. So thank you so much, Alexi, for coming to visit with us today, and for all that you've left with us to think about and enjoy. And please thank Leah again. We are so glad and grateful to have both of you guys interacting here with our Kolbe families. Thanks so much, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.